It's the Brian Lehrer Show on WNYC, live from the Greene Space today. Good morning, everyone. And when we are doing the show live in the Greene Space, you can watch the Brian Lehrer Show as well as listen. So if you choose, you can go to WNYC.org or go to the WNYC Facebook page or a Twitter feed, and you can get live streaming video of the Brian Lehrer Show in the Greene Space today. So most of you by now have heard sound bites from that strange and unusual televised confrontation yesterday between Donald Trump, Chuck Schumer, and Nancy Pelosi, right? In fact, based on the sound bites and stories that are out there, you might think it was just Schumer, Pelosi, and Trump in the room. Unfair fight, 2 against 1. But actually, it wasn't. It was the 2 Democratic congressional leaders, plus the president, and the vice president, Mike Pence. He was also there. Here is what Vice President Pence sounded like during that rapid-fire exchange. And later. And when it was really getting hot. That's right, he didn't say one word. On television last night, commentators were throwing their generational references. Rachel Maddow said Pence was like Mr. Roboto. That's a Styx song from the 80s. Baby boomer Jonathan Alter on MSNBC said Pence was like Lurch from the Addams Family. In the Times today, they said he was like a throw pillow. That's a reference. At first I thought, well, grandmother's couch, but no, really, that's a reference for all ages. I'll just say he looked like he was waiting for a bus or a canceled New Jersey Transit train. No, that would be pacing and guffawing and cursing. But I wonder what he was thinking. Did he not want to upstage the president, not take the president's side on shutting down the government over a border wall, or just keeping his powder dry for a clean start just in case? It's Pelosi who's getting most of the love in the press today for yesterday's SmackDown. It was for exchanges like this.
Well, thank you, Mr. President, for the opportunity to meet with you so that we can work together in a bipartisan way to meet the needs of the American people. I think the American people recognize that we must keep government open, that a shutdown is not worth anything, and that you should not have a Trump shutdown. You have the White House, the Trump shutdown. You have the White House, you have the Senate, you have the House of Representatives, you have the votes. You should pass it right now.
No, we don't have the votes, Nancy, because...
And it was for exchanges like this.
You know, Nancy's in a situation where it's not easy for her to talk right now, and I understand that, and I fully understand that. We're going to have a good discussion, and we're going to see what happens. But we have to have border security.
Mr. President, please don't characterize the strength that I bring to this meeting as the leader of the House Democrats who just won a big victory.
Elections have consequences, Mr. President.
Let me just...
So, the New York Times, you can applaud for the theater if you want. We could take a poll of who you're applauding for, but I think we won't. The New York Times today says, for those who study women in politics, it was a notable moment. We rarely get to see a woman in that level of leadership confronted in that way, said Debbie Walsh, the director of the Center for American Women in Politics at Rutgers. I think this was an example that really speaks to women's capacity to lead and to do it civilly, to do it with grace, and to be a strong leader. They add that, according to one Democratic aide in the room and a House Democrats meeting later, Pelosi questioned Mr. Trump's manhood, calling the wall debate a manhood thing for him. She also primly likened the meeting to, quote, a tinkle contest with a skunk, adding, I was trying to be the mom. But the Times also notes that many of the newly elected Democrats whose support she needs to be elected Speaker next month come from districts won by Mr. Trump, and she is walking a fine line in antagonizing him. While she's being cheered on the Democratic left, the article says centrists may react more warily, knowing that their voters sent them to Washington to compromise more than fight. Our first guests in the Greene Space today are three members of that historic group of Americans, Democrats from our area who won congressional elections last month to take seats in the House of Representatives that had been held by Republicans. Here are some stats before we meet the three about that incoming Democratic caucus in the House of Representatives. If you don't know the big picture, 66 new House Democrats, 43 of them took Republican seats. More than half are women, and a third are people of color. House Democrats will also include more military veterans than any time in more than 20 years, and two of those are on the stage with us. So let's meet Max Rose, who won in New York's 11th Congressional District. That's all of Staten Island. Was that applause for Max Rose or for Staten Island? Plus a little of Brooklyn, including all our parts of Bay Ridge, Bath Beach, Dyker Heights, Gravesend, Sheepshead Bay, and Bensonhurst, neighborhoods near the Verrazano Bridge, with two Z's, please. Donald Trump won Staten Island by 17 points over Hillary Clinton. That's a larger percentage than he won Texas by. Also with us, Mikey Sherrill, who won in New Jersey's 11th Congressional District. That's parts of Morris, Essex, Sussex, and Passaic counties. Trump won this district, too, by about a point in 2016. It's Morristown, Wayne, Wanacue, Lake Hopatcong, the Ramapo Hills. And Tom Malinowski is here. He won in New Jersey's 7th district. Defeating incumbent Leonard Lance. That's all of Hunterdon County and parts of Essex, Morris, Somerset, Union, and Warren counties, a spread out district. It's like from Westfield, pretty close to the city, out to the west to the Pennsylvania line. Hillary Clinton won that district, but by only about a point. Welcome, all of you, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
You all came on for campaign interviews, so now we can get to know you more outside the context of binary political combat. Welcome back to WNYC. And since none of your districts are around the corner, thanks so much for trekking to the Greene Space today. We really appreciate the effort that this took for all of you. And only one of you supports Pelosi for Speaker, I know, at least as of last check. And we'll get to that to see if yesterday changed anything. But I don't want to make this all about that. So let's start more generally. Max Rose, you won a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star for war injuries in Afghanistan. I know people hear in theory about roadside bomb attacks and they gasp. Here, folks, as a New Yorker who got wounded in one. I see you're still a captain in the National Guard, but the Times also called you a cerebral history major at Wesleyan. Those don't go together very much in today's America. How did they wind up going together for you?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. My mother's here, and I got to tell you, for the last week, it wasn't my son just got elected to Congress. It's my son's going to be on the Brian Lehrer Show. So this is phenomenal.
Mom, you got to get your priorities straight.
Look, I don't see a contradiction there at all. And while two of us are veterans on the stage, all of us are public servants who have served abroad. And in the 21st century, as we consider these incredibly complex threats, that's what matters. Now, coming from Wes and being a New Yorker, it was deeply instilled in me this sense that you have to serve. And I chose a form of that public service, there's no doubt, and we all continue to. But I think that there's an incredibly strong commonality amongst all public servants, which is that you cannot afford just to bicker. You cannot afford to just think about social media or just think about your own self-interest. You've got to do something to accomplish the proverbial mission. And that's what we're hoping to bring to Washington, D.C., God forbid. So irrespective, right? So, I see no difference in between, putting on the nation's uniform and now having another uniform on and continuing the fight.
Mikey Sherrill, you went to the Naval Academy in the 90s, I see, and spent almost 10 years on active duty, Navy helicopter pilot, and other things. And you have a master's in global history from the London School of Economics. And you went to law school at Georgetown and served as an assistant U.S. attorney for New Jersey. And I see you and your husband are raising 4 kids in Montclair, ages 6 through 12. So you're ready for anything. how did your cerebral side and interest in the military come together?
Well, my grandfather was a pilot in World War II, and I always wanted to follow in his footsteps, so that was certainly a drive for me. But in wanting to serve my country, I also was very interested in the institutions of our democracy. I think that we're seeing now Congress is just not the strong branch of government that we need it to be in this country. It's one of the reasons I'm running. I think it's one of the reasons that we all want to see.
Already won, Mikey.
I'm not running.
It must go. How long was the campaign? Like from the
The
time?
campaign was forever. The campaign was decades. So we're making the transition. I will be sworn in January 3rd. So it's one of the reasons I ran. And I think the reason that we all want to see great bipartisan legislation passed.
And Tom Malinowski, let me start here with you. You're an immigrant. Tell people where you were born and how you wound up coming to this country and to New Jersey.
Well, thank you, Brian. Yes, indeed. I was born in Poland back in the days when it was a communist country. Came to America, to New Jersey, when I was 6 years old, and took the oath of citizenship when I was 11. And always remembered that oath to support and defend the Constitution I took when I was 11 years old. It's the same oath we're going to take on January 3rd, the same oath we've all actually taken at various points in our career. And it was a big part of my childhood, the consciousness that I came from a dictatorship, a place where we don't have the freedoms and liberties and institutions that we take for granted at our peril in the United States, and the belief that I should dedicate at least some of my life to trying to defend them.
And most of your career has been in human rights work of one kind or another. Your bio on Twitter reads, diplomat, father, former Assistant Secretary of State for Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor, Congressman-elect in New Jersey's 7th District. Did your origins in a communist country inform your interest in human rights? All right.
It might have had something to do with it, yes. I see your point there, Brian. But yeah, I do have a little bit of experience doing combat with dictators in other countries. And that experience might prove relevant.
And Max Rose, you also worked on criminal justice reform. I see when you worked in the Brooklyn DA's office under the late Ken Thompson. I think that work was really interesting. Can you describe it briefly?
Absolutely. And we now refer to him as the late, great Ken Thompson, Brooklyn's first African-American DA. And Ken, no, please. And, Ken ran a race and unseated a 20-year incumbent, Democratic incumbent. Nobody thought that he could win. And when he ran, he spoke about establishing a fair and just criminal justice system. One of the things that he ran on was building out a conviction review unit. And then after he won, he actually did it. And everyone said, Ken, you're crazy for doing this because you're going to let somebody out of prison and then you're going to get Willie Horton. And what's fascinating is Ken took this risk, right? Over 20 men are now freed from prison from crimes they did not commit. Their lives irrevocably changed for the better. But more importantly, since Ken's passing, establishing a conviction review unit has become the baseline for any district attorney who wants to assert that they are progressive or democratic. That's how quickly we can change politics in this country if we actually show courage, if we actually show integrity. His legacy is incredibly important to me. And I think showing that type of courage and integrity as we pursue, whether it's social justice initiatives or a myriad of other initiatives that actually will help people in Congress, I think we have to remember that sentiment.
I think most policies that we associate with mass incarceration are at the state and local level. Most kids from Brooklyn who wind up at Rikers or wherever aren't committing federal crimes. That's why, part of why the Ken Thompson conviction review is so significant. What can Congress do to reduce mass incarceration? Because now you're going there.
Well, actually, there's tremendous bipartisan legislation in front of the Senate right now. People always talk about, how vets can get along, but I do want to take this opportunity to call out my fellow vet, Tom Cotton, for obstructing that, which I think is
Conservative Republican from Arkansas.
which is absolutely disastrous, because we can't just put criminal justice reform in a silo, because it is certainly a matter of justice, but it's also a matter of public safety, and it's also a matter of fiscal sanity here. If you are for keeping cops safe, if you are for spending our public money effectively, then I think you do have to be for this type of common sense criminal justice reform, where we can look at the fact that close to over 70% of ex-offenders end up recidivating. That doesn't make any sense. We have to provide people with the resources that they can actually be successful citizens in a flourishing economy.
And Mikey Sherrill, same question for you, since you were an assistant U.S. attorney in New Jersey. How do you look at the issue of criminal justice reform and what can be done at the federal level to have an impact in the state, in your district, as you go to D.C.?
Well, I think criminal justice reform is one of the key things that we need to do to advance civil rights in this country. While I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office, I helped to start the first federal prisoner reentry court in New Jersey, helping people coming out of federal prison successfully reenter their communities. And at the federal level, which is where I have most of my experience, we can do sentencing guidelines reform, which I think that's being discussed right now in the Senate. When I'm saying that we really need to see Congress working better, part of that comes from my background in criminal justice, with the idea that the Koch brothers and the ACLU agree on the bill that we need to get through Congress, and we haven't been able to pass that. And we've been working on that for years. And I think something that's so critical when we see the House of Representatives, as we move into the next year becoming a Democratic House, we see how that's impacting legislation throughout both the House and the Senate, because the Senate's had 2 years really to take up this bill, and they just haven't done it. And so to now see that they're getting, I think, some pressure, I think we'll see some good things.
They're pretty
moving forward.
close. I know in the Senate the rules are such that an individual senator like Tom Cotton can go a long way to holding up a bill. But I think even Trump supports that criminal justice reform bill, and if it comes to a vote, it's likely to pass and get signed into law, right?
I think that's right. It's had wide bipartisan support. In fact, I know my own Senator Cory Booker's been working on that for years, and it should pass if it gets a vote.
Tom Malinowski, you served, I see, on President Clinton's National Security Council, and for Obama, you were in the role of Assistant Secretary of State for Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor. That's a pretty broad category. Tying to the conversation we were just having, I see you tweeted yesterday, Trump is saying that America uses our criminal justice system to take hostages in political negotiations, thus legitimizing China and others doing the same. This endangers every American who does business abroad. You want to make the segue to that issue?
Sure. I was referring to President Trump's comments yesterday about the arrest of this Chinese executive, the Huawei executive, who was detained at our request by the Canadian authorities. It's a complicated case, and I'm not going to comment on the merits of that prosecution, potentially. But what the president said was that he might be willing to release her if the Chinese make concessions in trade negotiations. And I got to tell you, I've dealt with the Chinese and with the Russians and others as a diplomat, and we have always labored to persuade them that the United States has the rule of law, that our criminal justice system is not politicized, that when we arrest somebody, it's because we think they've committed a crime. And for the president to suggest, to imply what all the haters of America believe, which is that we're hypocrites, that we don't actually stand by those principles, that we're willing to arrest somebody and then trade them in a trade negotiation, is, number one, wrong. It hurts our reputation. Number two, yes, it does send a signal to the Chinese, the Russians, and everyone else that, yeah, they can do the same thing. Americans abroad, tourists, travelers, business people, yeah, you can arrest them too and hold them hostage to try to get something from us. It's incredibly irresponsible, and it comes back to why we're all here. We have a responsibility to form a Congress that checks that kind of behavior.
By the way, on your Twitter bio that I mentioned, it reads, diplomat, father, former assistant secretary of state, etc. Why'd you put diplomat first?
I don't remember.
Oh, maybe an aide did
They're
it.
both very important. Well, you have to be a diplomat to be a good parent, I think, sometimes.
That's right. Depends on your parenting style, right? Listeners, who wants to ask a question of these three incoming members of Congress? 212-433-WNYC, 212-433-9692. Max Rose from New York, Mikey Sherrill and Tom Malinowski from New Jersey, 212-433-9692. And first priority to folks who live in their districts, but anyone may call. What do you want to ask about the experience so far of these incoming freshman Democrats to be? And we'll have others who are elected from our area on the show in the coming weeks. We're honored to have these three in the Greene Space today. For now, it's Max Rose, Mikey Sherrill, and Tom Malinowski. Your calls at 212-433-WNYC, 212-433-9692. And here in the Greene Space, just raise your hands, and we will come around with microphones. So, Mr. Rose and Ms. Sherrill, you were among 16 House Democrats who signed a letter last month calling for the party to change the status quo. That's a quote, and vowing a vote for new leadership in next year's Congress, meaning, I guess, not Nancy Pelosi. How come, Mike Sherrill?
Well, I didn't sign that letter.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I
I
did.
read that you did. I'm sorry.
Well, no, but I did make a commitment to the district that I would be advocating for new leadership and would not be supporting Nancy Pelosi. And I did that because, I really do think we need to move forward in new and innovative ways. I think we have a tough road ahead of us to create the good bipartisan legislation that we need. And I think, given that, it's time to move forward in a new way.
Well, Max Rose, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm shocked you're asking this question. No journalist has been wanted to talk to me about this. I
will note that we went 21 minutes before bringing it up.
I do find it fascinating that after I ran for 15 months saying that I was not a supporter of Leader Pelosi, that now there's somehow even this minor expectation that I would change my mind. But I do want to frame this issue in a larger context, because I think all of us ran on the idea of not just winning a campaign, but changing politics irrevocably in this country for the better. And there are really three prongs to that. One is a change of leadership, certainly. The other is the need for far more bipartisanship in this country, moving us away from this era of absolute hyperpartisanship and vitriol. And then the third prong, though, is getting the incredibly toxic and corroding nature of money in our politics out of the system. The fact that federal lobbyists and corporate PACs are literally buying off politicians on both sides of the aisle, and they've been doing it for multiple generations here. So certainly at one point or another, we are going to move beyond this question of who's going to be the leader and who's not. But if you think that signifies the end of us trying to change politics in this country, it absolutely does not.
Tom Malinowski, why are you for Nancy Pelosi for Speaker?
During the campaign, I said I would support a speaker who would help me deliver for New Jersey on issues like building the Gateway Tunnel and trying to get back our state and local tax deductions. And I had extensive conversations with, I think, soon-to-be Speaker Pelosi on those issues, and she made the commitments that I needed. More broadly, I think we're in a really dangerous moment in our country's political history. Our institutions, our values are under attack. We have a very fragile foothold and a narrow window of opportunity in the House of Representatives to try to restore people's faith that that institution can work in the face of that assault. We have to get legislation passed to get things done. I think Nancy Pelosi has shown us that she is a leader who knows how to do that. And I think the last thing we need on January 3rd is to start a drawn-out, uncertain leadership fight in the Democratic Party, when what we need to do is to start getting bills passed.
Let's take a phone call. Let's take a phone call on this. Richard on Staten Island on line 2 in Max Rose's district. Richard, you're on WNYC. Hi.
Hi, good morning. I voted for Max, and I'm glad I voted for Max. But
So am I.
I remember a get-together that was held by retirees of the UFT, and Max was confronted with a question from a lady who said, why do you, in a debate with Donovan, bash Nancy Pelosi? Okay? And what Max said was, basically, he wasn't really bashing her. He was talking about this new leadership that he was just describing. Now, that's all well and good. And having, and I also asked him a question, too. He probably remembers me. But anyway.
I do. I'm going to knock on your door this evening.
No. Listen, Max, I voted for you, and I'm glad I did. And I told you that I would vote for you, not because you're not Dan Donovan, but because I believe in you. I think you're a good guy. But I think these attacks by good people like Max on good people like Pelosi and de Blasio hurt us. We give our enemies ammo. But one big point that the other congressman said, which I think is so true, we are not really dealing with regular Republicans. This is not Mitt Romney. This is not even George W. Bush. This is an out-and-out fascist. And to talk about, my district is electing us to be bipartisan, absolutely not. I haven't met a Democrat who voted who said, I want people to be nice to each other again. They want to confront this guy.
Richard,
And, she's capable of that.
And she's capable of that, he said. Go ahead,
So
Mr. Rose.
first of all, thank you for calling in, and thank you, of course, for your support. I absolutely reject the idea that I have any enemies in this political process. I reject that idea, and that's not good for this country. I ran on the premise of a very basic, simple story that in 2013, when my vehicle hit an improvised explosive device in Afghanistan, my life was saved. More importantly, the lives of the soldiers I was with, who I love and was entrusted with leading, their lives were saved as well by the armor underneath my vehicle. The only reason why we got that armor was because of a simple and small and unreported act of bipartisanship. That was once the story of this country. And I sincerely believe that it can be the story of this country yet again. It was no surprise. You know, I ran not just attacking my opponent, Dan Donovan, not just attacking the state of our politics, but also I did criticize Mayor de Blasio for acting like Staten Island does not exist, for ignoring Staten Island. You know what that was? That was an argument that I think we need a ferry on the South Shore. That was an argument that I think it is despicable that Staten Islanders have to commute for 90 minutes each way. Despicable that we have incredible health disparities on Staten Island and no public hospital.
But let me jump in. As it pertains to Pelosi, are you saying that she is too partisan, since you're talking about bipartisanship, is she too partisan compared to whatever Speaker of the House elected by the Democratic caucus who you would like to see? And is it that she's too far left?
No. The point that I'm making, and I don't want to speak for Mikey, but I think many of us who were made this point throughout our campaigns, is the point is that we need a wholesale change in the very nature of our politics in this country, and our leadership
But what's
is
she
part
doing
is
wrong?
part no let me finish here, is part and parcel for that. Now, I know that you and the media often likes to try to buttonhole folks, is that, are you far too left? Are you moderate? Are you not? Part of the argument that I was making, in essence, was that when we had the keys to the castle the last time, we weren't bold enough. We didn't pass the Employee Free Choice Act. We saw a public option yanked out of our health care bill. We still, to this day, a hedge fund manager pays a lower tax rate than the cops and the firemen and the teachers who call my district home.
But
I'm
I'm trying to get you to a specific. On Nancy Pelosi is to what? To get your vote?
No. And the point is that I am exactly trying to push back on this point here. So when we talk about a change in leadership, again, it is not a question of Nancy Pelosi is to this or to that. The question is what is the potential of our politics in this country, and how important is it to see a wholesale change in our leadership to achieve that? So we can keep on going back and forth here, and I don't think it will get us anywhere towards the point.
Mikey Sherrill, same question.
So I think what a lot of us were concerned about after the 2016 elections is that the Democratic Party was not connecting with our voters, that voters in post-industrial towns were not feeling like the Democratic Party was their party. My grandfather was a member of the United Auto Workers. Being a member of a union brought our family into the middle class. And so to see the type of people that my grandfather represented, to think that in some way the Democratic Party was not representing them was really upsetting to me. The people that I knew that we were fighting for and that we had been fighting for my entire lifetime and generations back did not feel that connection, I thought was a real problem. So I ran, and from the start, people were saying to me, Mikey, the Democratic Party has a problem. They're not connecting with voters. And I said, I get it. And so I went around my district and I listened to people for over a year and a half on what it was that they needed, what it was that was important. And I connected with them. And I think Max connected with them. And I think Tom connected with them, because we were in our districts finding out what is it that you need to make your lives better, because that's what I think as a member of Congress I should be striving to do. And so we find all this information, we connect with our voters, we make a campaign, we flip these districts, and then we get down to Washington, and it's more of the same. It's, I have this piece of legislation I want to put forward, and I think it's going to make us look good and the Republicans look bad. Or the only thing I want to do
Who did that?
I'm not going to tell you who did that, but it just happened. But I want to put this forward because I think it'll show just how bad the Republicans are. Or we should do this because it'll show this. And I even said to the person I was talking to, I said, that's actually not my goal, because you know what? Making Republicans look bad doesn't actually advance the needs of the people in my district. And so when I say we need bipartisan legislation, I heard that gentleman because I understand that we can't have bipartisan legislation at any cost, right? I think a lot of us feel ill-used, for example, by Senator Mitch McConnell and some of what he's done, partisanship at any cost. And we don't want to be kind of rolled by that type of person. However, we just can't have these cycles where we get great legislation passed and then we spend the whole next cycle fighting over it. So we got the Affordable Care Act passed. Nobody thinks it's a great piece of legislation, right? It was a good start. It was what we had to do to start moving forward and start getting everyone covered. And then we spent the last 2 years, Republicans attacking it at every turn. And now we're going to get back in power, and we're going to start to try to get back what we've gained, what we had. But instead, wouldn't it be nice if we were actually now moving forward and fixing the problems with it?
So do you see Pelosi's performance in that, televised thing with Schumer and Trump yesterday, and Mike Pence, in that light, that she was going in there just to try to make Trump look bad, not to solve a problem, and that's part of what you were just describing?
No, certainly not. I was very proud of my party yesterday. I was very proud of Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer for what they were able to do to stand strong on the things that this country needs. I'll tell you, throughout my campaign, I heard over and over again, we don't need a wall between the United States and Mexico. We need a tunnel into Manhattan. This administration...
You can hear the applause on both sides of the river.
Right. This administration already has $1.6 billion. They haven't spent yet. I believe in strong border security, but that involves drones, that involves technology, that involves border guards. That does not involve this ineffective wall. I think it's a waste of money, and I think we should be funding real infrastructure projects across this country. So that was not my issue. My issue is, as a whole, is this party, is the Democratic Party advancing the needs of people throughout this country?
But the same question I asked Max Rose is, does this mean Nancy Pelosi is too far left? Does it mean she's too partisan? A lot of media, at least, are reacting to yesterday's event as, she just proved to a lot of people that she is extremely capable of leading the Democratic caucus and is a real leader.
I think there are different things that you need to do, and you need to do all things well if you're going to lead. And so, yes, you need to stand up for our values, for our institutions, for our people. You also need to make sure that as a party, we are advancing the needs of people throughout this country. And I want to see movement. on infrastructure, and I want to see movement on healthcare, and I want to get rid of the state and local tax deduction cap. Not everybody in the country agrees with me on that one.
And you don't think she's the best person among the Democrats in the House to move that forward?
I had, we were down in Washington for 2 weeks. We didn't talk about those things, except for when I was with the freshman members of Congress.
All right. We're going to take a 1-minute break, and then we're going to continue with these 3 incoming members of Congress from our area, Max Rose, Tom Malinowski, and Mikey Sherrill. Our next caller is going to be someone from Tom Malinowski's district in Berkeley Heights. And our phone number for others, 212-433-WNYC, 433-9692. And we'll take your questions in the Greene Space here, too. Stay with us.
Hi, I'm Allison Stewart, host of All of It on WNYC, the daily live radio show at the intersection of culture and the culture. On the next All of It, actor Matthew Rhys of The Americans will be by to talk about his love of wine, specifically his docuseries appropriately called The Wine Show. Plus, we'll learn more about a new art show at Columbia's Wallach Art Gallery called Posing Modernity, the Black Model from Manet and Matisse to today. Don't miss All of It with Allison Stewart, weekdays at noon on WNYC.
Support for WNYC comes from Jazz at Lincoln Center, presenting vocalist Sashal Vasandani and Friends for a Nat King Cole Centennial Celebration, December 14th and 15th at Jazz at Lincoln Center, Columbus Circle, New York City. Tickets at jazz.org. Daniel's Husband, a new play about love and commitment, now in performances at the West Side Theater through December 30th. For tickets and more information, visit danielshusband.com. Leadership support for digital innovation at WNYC is provided by the Jerome L. Greene Foundation.
This is WNYC, 93.9 FM and AM 820, NPR News and the New York Conversation.
Brian Lehrer on WNYC, live in the Greene Space today. And when we're live in the Greene Space, you can watch the show as well as listen at WNYC.org or the WNYC Facebook feed. Our first guest in the Greene Space today, 3 incoming members of Congress, all fresh people. Is that what you say? What do you say, Michelle? What do you call yourself? I guess
maybe first years.
First years.
Plebes at the Naval Academy.
Plebes at the Naval Academy. Incoming, all who took seats that were previously held by Republicans from our area. Max Rose, who won in New York's 11th Congressional District. That's all of Staten Island, plus a little of Brooklyn across the bridge. Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey's 11th Congressional District, parts of Morris, Essex, Sussex, and Passaic counties. And Tom Malinowski in New Jersey's 7th District, parts of Hunterdon, Essex, Morris, Somerset, Union, and Warren counties. I think I got that all right. And let's take a call from Tom Malinowski's district. Peter in Berkeley Heights. You're on WNYC. Hello there.
Hi there. I'm glad to be on, Brian. Thank you. Mr. Malinowski, and actually all of you, my concern is primarily with security of the vote. I mean, we hear lots of things about voter fraud and, basically unsupported allegations. But I'm looking at certain cases in Georgia, North Carolina, Florida, some in Wisconsin, Michigan, and even a few in New Jersey in history, I think, of allegations of disenfranchisement, suppression, vote security, and fraudulent acts for mail-in ballots, and the restoration of the rights of felons or former felons, people who have already served their sentence and should no longer have their rights. If you serve your time, you should actually have your citizens' rights restored. I'm curious to know if any of you have investigated ways of using your position in a federal government to secure and ensure the voting rights of the citizens at large and confidence in the results of elections.
Mr. Malinowski will give that to you first with your constituent.
Thank you, Peter. There are a couple of different issues here. One is the security of the ballot itself, and as you may know, New Jersey has one of the most antiquated and least secure voting systems in the country. We have these machines that we thought were really cool in 1978. They have, buttons and lights, and no wasteful paper comes out of them. And of course, we now know that that's what makes them hackable and insecure. Thank goodness we did not have that happen in the midterm elections, to our knowledge. The Congress last year rejected, in a partisan vote, a proposal to give more money to the states to upgrade their election infrastructure to protect against those sort of things. I think we're going to have a very different vote in the House of Representatives this year. More broadly, it's just amazing that there are some people in our politics who seem to think that the only way they can get their way is to have fewer people voting in America. And we're seeing in other states active measures to try to disenfranchise voters, making it, these signature requirements that if you registered to vote 30 or 40 years ago, and your signature, God forbid, has changed a little bit in that time, they reject your absentee ballot. Polling stations in African-American neighborhoods being told to close at earlier hours so that there are longer lines. These are very blatant things, and it's partly because the Supreme Court decided a few years ago that we've turned a corner in America and we no longer need the Voting Rights Act in parts of the country. One of our first acts in the House, H.R. 1, the first bill the Democrats are going to put forward after January 3rd, will be designed to address some of those problems. I'm going to be a very strong supporter of that effort.
Slate describes H.R. 1 as probably a one-house bill because Mitch McConnell wants nothing to do with it and can simply not bring it up in the Senate. Slate calls it the House Democrats' multi-purpose reform bill, which would include national automatic voter registration, limits to partisan gerrymandering, a restoration of the Voting Rights Act, campaign finance reform, and a tightening of congressional ethics. Mr. Malinowski, and the audience likes those, few people anyway, like those provisions. But if this is a bill that's going to be for show purposes because it only can get through the House, is it an example of what Ms. Sherrill was just talking about, where the priority, H.R. 1, is to do things that will make the Republicans look bad rather than get something accomplished?
I don't think there is a single thoughtful Republican in my congressional district who thinks it's a good idea to have dark money from other countries coming into America to influence our politics. Ethics reform, campaign finance reform is absolutely a bipartisan issue when it comes to the American people. If it isn't in the Congress, well, that's something that Leader McConnell in the Senate is going to have to explain. I think there are aspects of this bill, there are specific proposals that we may be able to pass, even in this divided Congress by attaching pieces to other pieces of legislation. But at the end of the day, I think it is up to the Senate Republican leadership in particular to decide whether they're going to do something, work with us to do something that the vast majority of their supporters want the Congress to do or not. And if they don't, well, then yes, that becomes an issue in the next election, and I think that's totally appropriate to draw that contrast for the American people.
Ms. Sherrill, is H.R. 1 an example of what you were talking about?
Well, I certainly hope not. I certainly hope that we can get some of these great measures passed. In New Jersey, I'm very proud of the efforts we've had to expand voter access. In my own county, Essex County, the county clerk looked at the rules on the books and realized that he would be able to have some early voting at Turtleback Zoo on the weekend, which is so important for people that work, especially people that work in the city. I've mentioned we have some issues with New Jersey Transit getting back and forth. I encourage all my voters to vote before they leave for work. This is a great movement forward. But certainly, this is where I'd like to see, if this is going to be H.R. 1, I'd love to see H.R. 2 be an infrastructure project, H.R. 3 being expanding coverage for healthcare, H.R. 4 gun safety legislation. I could go on, right, with real things that are going to help people. So I just would love to see a broader look at how we're going to move forward.
And is there no H.R. 2, H.R. 3 projected yet? I don't know.
I've not seen them.
I think we're definitely going to have a push in the House that will, I think, be bipartisan to shore up the Affordable Health Act and to do something about prescription drug costs and health care costs. As you recall, after the effort to repeal the ACA failed last year, there were Republicans in the Senate who got together with Democrats to support provisions that would have shored up the existing system because it was the responsible thing to do. And the leadership in the House and Senate blocked any consideration of those measures. So we're gonna get to work on those as well.
And Mr. Rose, enthusiastic
Ryan,
about
call me
HR
Max,
1,
please.
or how?
All right.
How? I'm just being respectful to everybody. Once you're inaugurated, I'm going to call you Congressmember.
All right.
But go ahead. How enthusiastic about HR 1 for the content and for it being HR 1 or announced by Nancy Pelosi in the way that it
I'm
was?
extraordinarily enthusiastic about HR 1 for a few reasons. First off, we all ran on it. We wrote a letter to the Democratic leadership demanding that this be the first issue in Congress. And as I talk about so much about changing politics in this country, part of the problem is that people run on stuff and then they don't do anything after they get elected. And this is our bold statement that this was not just some type of stunt. We meant what we're saying and we're doing it. But going back to this idea of bipartisanship and the Republicans, we are going to put a very, very simple choice in front of the Republicans. Are you hypocrites or not? If you want to run on draining the swamp, if you want that to be your shtick, let's start doing it. Let's drain the swamp. Or are you in the pockets of special interests who have bought off politicians in Washington, D.C.? And if they make the decision that they care more about special interests than they do about their own voters who have demonstrated over and over and over again that they desperately want to see the swamp drained, then maybe the legislation won't be passed, or some of it, but they will certainly suffer consequences at the ballot box for that.
And
We're here.
And with Congress members-elect Max Rose, Tom Malinowski, and Mikey Sherrill from New York and New Jersey, respectively, let's take a question from here in the Greene Space. Hello.
Good morning. I'm in the middle of reading Doris Kearns Goodwin's book, and
the one on leadership.
The one on leadership, and it really goes to show you. It breaks my heart that he's in the same house. Trump's in the same house as Lincoln. But the reason he's such a bad president is he's a very poor politician. Now, Nancy Pelosi, on the other hand, is a terrific politician with a terrific record. She passed the Affordable Care Act. She's been tremendous, and I know she's old. I'm old too. But us geezers have to get together. Questions. Two of you are going to have to make that vote, and you could either vote no or you can abstain. And to a certain extent, abstaining would mean that Nancy Pelosi needs fewer votes. If both of you were to abstain, then Nancy Pelosi, to get elected, would need fewer votes because you're elected by the whole House.
Do you mean a present vote? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, exactly. Okay. So I'd like you to comment on that. And the other thing I'd like to comment is Medicare for all. For the last 20 years, I've been in elected public office for 32 years. I'm retired now. But I'm also a volunteer tax preparer, and I speak to older, poor people frequently, and a lot of them are 63. They can't wait till they're 65. So Medicare for all. Medicare is very popular with them.
Did you say you were in elected office for 32 years?
Precisely.
Who are you? What did you hold?
I was in the Rockland County Legislature for 12, and the City Council suffered for the other.
Great. Thank you, sir. I'm not sure, Ms. Sherrill, that he's right about voting present or abstaining, making it easier for Pelosi to get elected Speaker. Doesn't she need the majority of the whole House, regardless whether you vote for another individual or abstain, or am I wrong about that? Do you know?
Yes. So it is, you need a majority of the people voting on the floor.
Who actually vote.
Who actually vote.
Okay, so he's right. Mm-hmm. And so his question is, do you plan to abstain or to vote for another individual?
So as I've mentioned, I've made a commitment to my district to not support Nancy Pelosi, so I won't be voting for her on the floor.
Which way?
Excuse me?
Which way? Meaning, will you abstain or will you vote for another individual?
I'll be voting,
I think that's his question.
Right, and I'll be voting for another individual on the floor.
And Max Rose?
Yeah, it's absolutely same here.
And let's see, I thought there was a follow-up in there.
Healthcare.
Oh, Medicare for all, right. Let's go down the road. Mr. Malinowski.
I am for, at this stage, giving every American the freedom to buy into a public option, a public system like Medicare. I think that's something that would work, that we can sell to the American people, because it would not force anybody to give up private health insurance, which is working for many, many Americans.
What would that cost? Why would that be an improvement? Would it cost a lot less to buy into Medicare than to buy a private insurance plan if you're 63 years old?
It could, and in fact, when the public option to the Affordable Care Act was first proposed, the Congressional Budget Office calculated that it would save the government money because it would create another competitive choice on the marketplace. We believe in the market in America. We believe in competition. Let's allow more competition in our healthcare system.
Which is why you don't support the Bernie Sanders style Medicare for all that would abolish all the private insurance in America?
I don't think it's realistic, especially where we are now, 2019, divided government, to say that we are going to abolish private health insurance in America. We have the system that we have, and we have to think of the difficulties of transforming it if we're really going to be serious about getting something done. I want action that's going to lower healthcare costs for people in my district. I want action that's going to get us to universal healthcare. And if it's not realistic, then I don't think it's the moral thing for me to do to put all of my eggs in that basket.
Mr. Rose, same question, Medicare for all?
No, look, I've been very clear on this, that what I am for is building on our existing system, certainly having a public option to allow people to always have choice. For more than a generation now, healthcare costs have been exceeding inflation. That's a tax on the working class and the middle class, and it's something that we have to very seriously address. But I don't think that means that we have to go to Medicare for all either. But what we do have to do is we do have to tell these hospital systems and these for-profit insurance companies that are constantly in this dramatic power asymmetry that they have between the consumer, that business as usual is no longer acceptable, and that government intervention in that regard has to happen. And there's plenty of examples for ways in which we can actually accomplish that. One thing I've spoken about is all-payer rate setting, which we've seen has dramatic success in Maryland. So again, we have got to lower these costs, and we have to establish universality. That does not mean, though, completely upending our existing system, and particularly telling many union members who have fought for their health care bills that those times are changing.
All-payer rate system, does that mean everybody buying an insurance plan pays the same rate regardless of age or health?
No. What that means is that there is a government role for making sure that there is a sensible pricing mechanism in our healthcare system. Because right now, the system's ridden with perverse incentives. Hospitals get paid more to fill beds. We do not have an emphasis on achieving health at all. We don't have one, and it's got to change.
And Ms. Sherrill, Medicare for all?
So no, I have not been a proponent of Medicare for all, because the price tag I've seen for that is $32 trillion, which quite frankly, in my district where we've seen taxes rising consistently year after year after year, it's making it harder and harder for middle class people to afford the cost of living. I can't sign on to that. Now, if we come up with a plan to show very particularly how we're going to lower costs, I'm very interested in that. Right now, what I'd like to see in this next Congress is how we get universal health care, how we make sure everyone gets covered. In New Jersey, we brought the mandate back. We're one of the few states that is actually driving down healthcare costs right now. I'm not sure that we are going to be able to get back the mandate in this Congress, but I do think that's key. And looking at other ways we can continue to improve upon the Affordable Care Act.
Bernie Sanders says the economics would work out because the tax hike on individuals would work out to less than what most people pay in premiums and deductibles and everything today.
I don't like things are going to work out. I like plans. So I want to see how that's going to work out. I'm not saying it won't. I just want to very particularly see something that's going to show me in a detailed fashion how we're going to drive costs down for consumers.
All right. Another question here in the Greene Space. We have one on this side here or no? Right over. Oh, over there. Oh, back there? Okay. Sorry. Hi.
Hi. I've been a canvasser for Mikey Sherrill, and I was thrilled to see her here today. So it's a big surprise for me. My question is about climate change. That is one of the most important things, as far as I'm concerned, that needs to be addressed. In New Jersey, we have pipelines that are traversing our state. We have a rollback in pollution standards now, and we have a number of power plants proposed for our state, one of which is in the Meadowlands, which will actually not benefit New Jersey at all, but benefit New York. So I'd like to just hear what our representatives would like to do and what their priorities are for climate change.
Ms. Sherrill, to your constituent.
Thank you. I think that's a great question. We in New Jersey have such wonderful opportunities to be a real leader in this space. We have the best offshore wind conditions for wind power energy in the world. We see the prices of wind power coming down. We already have 600 jobs in solar in the 11th district. We've seen some of the tariff wars and trade wars affecting our ability to grow that, but we want to grow that area. I know our governor wants to move forward with RGGI, the consortium looking into green power in the Northeast. He wants to see a green power economy. So what I would like to do now is see the plan, because you can't move to a green power economy on a dime, and we want to make sure, what are the calculations? Are we going to continue to subsidize nuclear for the near future so people don't move back to fossil fuels? How soon can we get a green power economy up and running? What are we going to have to do to our power grid? We should be moving forward on this. We should be leading the nation on this, but we need a comprehensive plan, and I'd like to see us moving forward on that quickly.
Mr. Malinowski?
Some of you may have seen a couple of days ago the administration's negotiators at the climate conference in Poland lined up with Saudi Arabia and Russia against the rest of the world to refuse to even welcome the report by scientists that the Earth is warming and that we're heading to a catastrophe in a dozen or so years. It was embarrassing to me as a former diplomat and as an American. My heart goes out to the career professionals who are forced to take that position alongside countries that do not share our values and our interests. I think, look, we have, again, a fragile foothold in the House of Representatives. We still have this president and the Senate that we have. I would like comprehensive action on something like a climate tax, which is what most economists believe we need to meet our commitments to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I don't think we're going to get that in the next 2 years. But we can certainly exercise checks and balances to make sure that the EPA enforces the laws that are on the books, that we don't see further rollbacks in environmental regulations, that Congress has a role to play in that process, that we protect the scientists that are working for the government and for the EPA so that they can use the word climate change. We can keep things from getting worse for 2 years while hopefully the states like New Jersey lead the way forward.
For time, we're almost out of time. When you mention a carbon tax, do you think there's a lesson for America in the Yellow Vests revolt taking place in France right now, the last straw trigger for which was this gasoline tax increase for the sake of the climate?
Well, I think a carbon tax, if we ever get there, would work very differently because it would be rebated to the people who are paying it. It's simply a way of using market incentives to encourage the private sector to move in the direction together, companies working together in the direction of clean energy. The alternative to that is what Republicans like even less, and that's heavy-handed regulation from Washington and from state governments. But one or the other, those are the choices we have. It's, as President Obama said, it's chicken or fish. There is not another option on the menu other than a global catastrophe that's going to ruin the American economy. China understands this. They're investing hundreds of billions of dollars in clean energy research. It's not because the Chinese Communist Party loves trees. It's because they want to win the future. Do we want to win the future? I say yes.
Max Rose, same. Chicken, fish, or the vegan alternative?
Plain and simple, as someone who has put on our nation's uniform, climate change is the greatest national security threat that we face as a country. And I'm tired of looking young people in the eye and telling them as a consequence of the incredibly short-termist thinking of our nation's politicians that they will have to suffer incredible consequences a generation from now. There's a few points that I think that we are often not acknowledging when it comes to this. One is that we need an Apollo project of the 21st century for battery technology, so that we can actually develop a system that can retain energy over the long term so we can truly transition ourselves to a carbon-free economy. The second is that going back to the corrosive nature of money in our politics. If we think that we are going to arrive at any sensible solution about this and have people at the table who have been bought off by the fossil fuel industry, we are out of our damn mind. And we have got to fix that. We have to make sure that the right people are at the table who can actually fix this problem over the long term. And I have all the faith in the world that that's going to happen.
We have a minute left, just a minute. Anybody, do any of you want to just kind of say a 15-second, okay, here we go. I'm ready to dive in to the ocean on January 1st. Just say a last whatever to your constituents and the people of the greater New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area or America. Here we go. And what, Max Rose?
Look, orientation was a series of cocktail parties. If I have to eat another mini crab cake, I'm going to jump off the Verrazano Bridge. And so I'm gaining another form of a freshman 15. So I got to think about how we're going to do our workout routine. Mikey and I are going to start a running regimen. I'm looking forward to that.
Mikey, Cheryl?
I'm really excited about my remedial PT with Max Rose. That's going to be great. I'm in great shape after a long campaign. But I have to say that what's really exciting to me, you've heard it here. The freshman class, I think, is dynamic. I think brings an incredible amount to the table. My favorite story, a woman came in to give us some training, and she'd been in politics for a very long time and said, something just happened to me that's never happened to me before. I was just mistaken for a member of Congress. So that's the new Congress we're going into, and it's going to be, I'm really very excited to work with everyone and get some stuff accomplished for the district.
And Tom Malinowski.
I met a lot of people in the last year who were feeling incredibly powerless in the face of what's happening in Washington. And I think the wonderful thing about this election is that it's renewed our sense that as citizens we have power. It's not going to be easy. We all know that. We're realistic. But this was a triumph, this election, for civic society, for democracy in America. It should restore our hope that if we work really, really hard, we can make this country better. And I think if we keep it up for a couple of years, we're actually going to be a stronger democracy than we were before Donald Trump.
Ladies and gentlemen, please thank incoming members of Congress from New York and New Jersey, Max Rose, Tom Malinowski, Mikey Sherrill. Thank you all so much for coming to the Greene Space.
Thanks so much.
Honor to have you here during the transition. This is WNYC, FM, HD, and AM New York. As they all hug each other on stage, and as I look for my legal ID as we get ready to go to the news, WNJT FM 88.1 Trenton, WNJP 88.5 Sussex, WNJY 89.3 Netcong, and WNJO 90.3 Toms River. In addition to WNYC FM, HD, and AM New York, we are New York and New Jersey Public Radio. You would think I would have memorized this legal ID by now, but it's just got too many frequencies in it. It's time for the latest news at 11:02, live from the Greene Space stage. It's Richard Hake.
Hi, Brian. President Trump's former personal attorney, Michael Cohen, has arrived in federal court in Manhattan for sentencing today. Cohen faces up to 4 years in prison for tax evasion, lying to Congress, and violating campaign finance laws. He pled guilty to misleading Congress about a plan to build a Trump skyscraper in Moscow and orchestrating payments to two women who said they had affairs with Trump. He also dodged $1.4 million in taxes. New York prosecutors have pushed for a substantial prison term, but Cohen's lawyers argued for leniency since he's cooperated with the federal investigation. New York City Council members are getting a chance to vent their frustration over a deal that's bringing Amazon to Long Island City. There's a hearing underway at City Hall as they question officials involved in writing the deal, and they're not the only ones venting. There are protesters right now inside the council chambers on the balcony. Politico's Sally Goldenberg has been following the story. She says she expects the council to be playing hardball today after being excluded from the original negotiations.
They're angry, and they feel they were cut out of a democratic process, and I think they're going to be tough.
This hearing comes shortly after the Economic Development Corporation released the proposal to Amazon. It's the first of 3 hearings the City Council will hold on the deal. The Orthodox Jewish community in Brooklyn is on alert due to a measles outbreak that sickened 39 people, almost all of them young children. Last week, the health department said students cannot attend yeshivas in certain neighborhoods unless they're immunized. Pediatrician Joseph Kaplowitz says since then, 4 or 5 patients come in each day to get vaccinated for the first time.
Their parents or even their grandparents would have been people who did immunize because they saw it every day of how bad these diseases were. But I find that because it's not really right there in their face, they don't necessarily know or see or realize what they're actually dealing with.
Last year, according to state data, 13 yeshivas in Brooklyn had measles vaccination rates less than 90%. There are more than 23,000 trash cans on New York City streets, and their design dates back to the 1930s. Well, now, WNYC's Alejandro Salazar reports the city wants to give them an update.
The Department of Sanitation has picked 3 finalists out of nearly 200 submissions to its Better Bin competition. The contest invited designers from around the world to propose environmentally conscious trash cans that will help reduce litter. The selected teams, Group Project, Ion Design GmbH Berlin, and Smart Design, will now each receive $40,000 to produce 12 full-size mock-ups. The prototype trash cans will be tested around the city next summer, and a first-place winner will be picked for mass production based on performance, public response, and feedback from sanitation workers.
New York Magazine staff is unionizing. The magazine's editorial staff has formed the New York Mag Union with the News Guild of New York. Organizers are asking their parent company, New York Media, to voluntarily recognize the union. New York Magazine is the latest media outlet to push for collective bargaining with its management. Staffers are calling for consistent benefits, higher salaries, and career development opportunities. The bargaining group includes editors, writers, internet producers, and other non-managers at the magazine and the affiliated websites including The Cult, Vulture, Intelligencer, Grub Street, and Strategist. Mostly sunny skies today, highs near 41 degrees. Tonight, increasing clouds, it'll drop down to around 31. And tomorrow, a slight chance of some rain showers, maybe some snow, with a high near 39 degrees. No accumulation expected, though. And that's the latest from the WNYC Newsroom. Live in the Greene Space, I'm Richard Hake.
On the next Fresh Air, from prisoner to crime reporter, we talk with Carrie Blakinger about her experiences in prison, including solitary on narcotics charges. And we'll talk about Texas prison reforms her reporting has led to. She covers criminal justice, specializing in prisons and the death penalty for the Houston Chronicle. Join us. Weekdays at 2 on 93.9 FM WNYC.
Support for WNYC comes from City Point Brooklyn, presenting the Brooklyn Arctic Adventure, a holiday virtual reality experience. Now through December 24th at City Point, located at 445 Albee Square West in downtown Brooklyn. Theater for a New Audience, presenting The Prisoner, with text and direction by Peter Brook and Marie-Hélène Estienne, following its run in London, Paris, and Edinburgh. Now through December 16th only. tfana.org. Heineken and by Hopsy, a countertop plug-and-pour appliance draft system serving beers on tap at home, including craft, IPAs, and imports, now featuring the Heineken Home Tap. More at tryhopsy.com/WNYC. You value the programs you hear on WNYC. That's why you're listening right now. So are thousands of others, people who would learn about your business on our air. Learn more about corporate sponsorship at WNYC.org/sponsor.
It's the Brian Lehrer Show on WNYC. Good morning again, everyone. Live from the Greene Space today. And when we're in the Greene Space, you can watch the Brian Lehrer Show as well as listen. If you want to watch live streaming video, go to WNYC.org or to the WNYC Facebook page. Now, taxi drivers out there, you know we love you here at the Brian Lehrer Show. We know the radio is a point of connection and a kind of survival tool for you out there. But, you know, in all our years of taking calls from cabbies, we never thought much of driver survival tool in a literal sense, unless you were being held up in a robbery, maybe. But we want to acknowledge the dark reality that in the past year, 8 professional cab drivers have died by suicide in New York City. Such a startling fact that illustrates that the yellow cabs are essential to the iconography and the heart of the city for so long. The men and women who make them go are not being taken care of and really, really struggling. And we know drivers for the Ubers and Lyfts and Vias over the past few years aren't doing all that much better. The story goes like this, for those of you who don't know. Over the past few years, the number of for-hire vehicles has risen to about 100,000, which is many times the number from before the apps, ramping up competition, leaving all drivers, whether they be Uber, Yellow, Green, struggling for an ever-shrinking piece of the pie. With me now is Meera Joshi. She's the chair and commissioner of the New York City Taxi and Limousine Commission. We'll talk about a harrowing year for drivers and maybe some good news on the horizon with pay raises on the way in early January under a new city policy. So, Commissioner, welcome back to WNYC.
Thank you. And it is sad that is the state of affairs, that our opening is talking about suicides. And I really just want to stress it's symbolic of what's happening in all sectors of the industry. The men who've committed suicide have been from different sectors. Some are medallion owners, some are cab drivers, and some drive for Uber, some drive for traditional black cars. And I think it's really demonstrates the financial distress that a lot of the day-to-day workers are going through in this growing business that is becoming more and more popular, and it's increasing mobility, which is absolutely wonderful for the city, but there is another side to it.
When you say there's another side to it, what are you referring to?
In talking about the app drivers, we started to get a lot of complaints about pay and how it was very difficult for them to make money. And when we dug in, we demanded that the apps give us all of their pay records and looked at them. 96% of these drivers are making less than a minimum wage. So last week we passed rules that will require that the apps pay their drivers minimum per minute and per mile, and that they keep each driver busy. And that will boost pay by about $10,000 a year for 96%, and that's tens of thousands of workers in New York City.
Do the families who are struggling receive any type of help with the medallion debt? If because that doesn't apply to the app-based drivers. Even as the rates are going up, the medallion debt that's left over because of the decline in the market.
There is very little solid help for the families of those who've lost a loved one, for those medallion owners that have committed suicide, but for medallion owners generally. And it's a stark reality. Many of these were borrowers who found themselves in a situation much like the housing market, where banks were very free to lend a lot of money. The refinancing terms for a medallion, this isn't publicly known. It's public, but it's not, often known. We're every 3 years. So every 3 years you have to go back to a bank and get charged refinancing, and also an opportunity to borrow more money, which when times were good, people did. Pulled $50,000 extra out. And the loans ballooned and ballooned. And now that the stability is gone from the market, those loans are being called in, the banks are foreclosing, they're asking for houses, they're asking for people's wives to be put on the loans as well. And there's not much that the borrowers can do. Foreclosure and bankruptcy are options. And ultimately, what we're trying to do is pressure the banks to write off a lot of these loans. They're not going to recover the money, and they're really good borrowers. These are people that work for a living, often paid double every month to pay down their loan. So they still have a good borrower. The loans need to be right-sized so that the economic model can survive, and the people that have spent their life as professional drivers can continue doing that work.
So you're asking the banks to do something voluntarily here that the city can't force them to do?
Yes, it's ironic, right? But you know what? You'd be surprised how many banks have already changed some of their lending practices and written down some of the notes, because they realize it's going to have to happen eventually anyway, and these are good borrowers. So it's a step that we can take, and we certainly don't want to take no steps at all, given the dire situation that so many owners are finding themselves in.
And I'm going to linger on the suicide issue for just another question. Most of the drivers who did take their lives this year were immigrants in their 50s and 60s. Some of them had told friends and families that they were having a difficult time making a living and dealing with it. Given that profile, is there anything of a preventive nature that the TLC is doing for drivers at psychological risk?
We are, number one, getting out as much as we can the word that you must reach out for help. And if you have a friend or a loved one that you notice that's demonstrating signs of isolation and depression, it's really important that they have contact with other people, even if it's a daily conversation, a check-in, to make sure that there's someone watching their mental health and preventing them from maybe taking a irreversible step. But when you raise the demographic and the age, it's a lot of the older drivers realize they have no pension, and they were relying on a medallion to be that pension. But no pension is symbolic of how all drivers work. They don't have health benefits. They're independent contractors. They don't have a pension. They don't have sick days. So anything goes wrong, and there's no safety net. And one thing I think the City Council is looking at, and hopefully will move quickly on, is giving us the jurisdiction to be able to provide some benefits packages for drivers. And pension is something that many of the drivers talk about, something that would be extremely helpful and give them more peace of mind.
How would you do that? What would City Council pass? Would it be authorization to require the fleet owners and Uber and Lyft, et cetera, to offer pension plans, or what would it be?
It's in early stages, but the bill itself basically says the city should study what a good benefits package would look like and then implement it. And really, it's very broad, in broad strokes like that. There's a variety of possibilities, and different drivers have different needs. So it's hard to say what that would look like at this point. But the first step would be giving the city the authority to take these kind of beneficial steps.
And listeners, if you're a driver for any kind of taxi or for-hire vehicle, we invite your phone calls right now for the Taxi and Limousine Commission Chair, Mira Joshi, or anyone else. We can take questions from people who ever are passengers in taxis and for-hire vehicles too. 212-433-WNYC, but drivers, we definitely invite your calls. 212-433-9692. Tell us more about what's coming in January.
So in January, well, actually, one of the big things that happened in August was City Council passed a bill that capped the licenses that we are allowed to issue. But part of that bill also told us and the Department of Transportation to study congestion. And I think in early next year, we'll start to publicly talk about policies that would restrict licensing or change the licensing framework for the Uber, Lyfts, Vias, and those in order to address midtown congestion. But also in January, the rules that we passed that provide minimum pay protection for all of the 80,000 app drivers out there will go into effect. And the drivers can go on our website, use a calculator, compare what they earned with what they should earn under the new rules. And if it doesn't match up, they come to us and we summons and penalize the company that didn't pay them appropriately, and they're entitled to restitution. Now, historically, we've provided this protection for cab drivers for years, since '97. And, about 4 or 5 years ago, from some of the larger actors, we were able to bring in millions of dollars in restitution for drivers that had been underpaid by cab owners. And so this is really bringing that framework to the app sector, where those drivers, just like cab drivers, need pay protection.
Uber and Lyft are both pushing back against the pay rules, I understand, saying it will make rides more expensive for customers and will limit competition. So how are they complying with the new rules, or how do you anticipate?
Well, they have to comply to stay licensed, and so they can't operate unless they pay their drivers at least the minimum that we require. And our economists that studied this figure maybe 10, 12 seconds more in wait time and 50 cents or so more in passenger fares. But these are a small adjustment for passengers for a big reward, which is the driver behind the wheels now making a livable wage. It's also good for New York City economy. That's $600 million that comes back back into the city economy. The $600 million goes to the drivers. They live and work in the city, and that money gets spent at city restaurants, city stores, and for city services.
Let's take a phone call. Let's go to Ridwan on line 9, an Uber driver calling from the Bronx. Ridwan, you're on WNYC. Hello there.
Hello. Hi, my name is Ridwan, and I drove a yellow cab before, and I'm also currently an Uber and Lyft driver. And I'm going to speak based on my experience when I started driving Uber a little over 3 years ago. When some of us started driving Uber, they pay us by mile, but then they don't used to have upfront pricing. What they used to have is they charge customers per mile. Then they introduce upfront pricing, but they still pay some of us by mile. But in many cases, it has occurred to many of us here driving that when we drive, they will charge a customer, let's say $50, and then we will get sometimes we will get like $25, and they take the rest. There have been some, I could give you an example that like 2 days ago, I picked a fare, which was a Lyft with Lyft, and the person was going to Newark. It was a shared ride. That means it's like the Uber pool. They charged the person $65. I picked the person from the Upper West Side, so I had to take the George Washington Bridge. But on the way, they added another person. When that other person that they added, they charged that person $50. And how much did I take out from all this amount? $60, including tolls and everything. And one time also, with Uber, I picked a fare. I'm just giving you some of the examples that I can remember.
Yes, that was a good story.
Yeah, one time also, I picked a fare from JFK. It's Uber Pool. Both of them were going to Crown Heights, Brooklyn. Each person was charged $35. I had $30. Right. So I think the new rule, much as I believe it's in good faith, is good. But what I think the city should have done is they should have rather tell Uber and Lyft and other app-based companies that you guys cannot take more than 25 or 30% of the total amount that you charge a customer.
Ridwan, let me get you a response from the Taxi and Limousine Commission Chair, Mira Joshi, but I want to ask you one follow-up question first. I'm just curious, for you making your, personal decisions as to how to maximize your income, I think you said you used to drive a yellow cab, now you're driving Uber and Lyft.
Yes.
Is that more lucrative?
Not much of a difference. It's just that with Uber and Lyft, you are much more independent. Unlike yellow, you have you work within a limited time scope.
I understand that they define for you.
Yeah.
So, Commissioner, what about his concerns? Can a maximum cut for companies like Uber and Lyft be legislated?
This is a concern that we hear a lot. And when we passed the rules, I was clear to say this is the beginning, because how much of the passenger's fare the driver's taking home actually is something that we need to quantify. Because what it does is if it allows the driver to share in the upside if you peg the pay also to the passenger's fare. So we recently got an additional amount of data on passenger fares and driver fares, which we're analyzing now, and we will know then what the world looks like. How much of the passenger fare is a driver taking home now? We have a lot of anecdotes, and they're very powerful, and now we need to put the facts to them. And if we see that the upside is really not shared, then we can add on to our rule a cap on the maximum amount of commission, so that the driver is then protected from the bottom, but gets the upside when the fare is higher. So I'd say that's sort of phase 2. We wanted to start with some protection given the number of drivers that are so below a livable wage. And with the added passenger fare information, we can analyze it and be transparent about the numbers so the public also knows, because I believe passengers care whether or not their driver is getting only a fraction of what they're paying. And that's information the public should have, and then do rulemaking based on that.
It sounded like the examples that Ridwan was giving were pointing to a particular problem with respect to Uber pool rides and the equivalent with Lyft, where when you pick up the second passenger, the proportion of the fare that the driver gets does not go up, or the proportion goes down because the dollar amount does not go up commensurate with the amount that it goes up for the company for that second passenger. Is that something you're aware of
Yeah,
already?
that's something we're aware of, and it's also something that now that we have all this passenger fare information, we're going to look at. We put in the rule a placeholder for adding a bonus for drivers when they do shared rides, and we'll be able to define what that is once we've analyzed the actual pricing. But what it is the driver sees 2 passengers come in and 2 fares are provided to the company, but the driver's paid the same amount for the mile and minute. But driving is also a service. There's a customer service element to that. So every new passenger that comes in, you have to make sure that experience is enjoyable, and that's work. And without recognizing that, there is a sense that drivers have, and we're going to look at the numbers to also really quantify it, that they're not paid for that extra work. That is that extra customer service that's required if you have multiple passengers coming in one car.
Let's go to a yellow cab driver, Cassius on line 2, calling from Brooklyn. Hi, Cassius. You're on WNYC with Mira Joshi.
Hey, good morning, Brian and Commissioner. I've called in to talk about this before. I really think we really need a serious job retraining program set up, just because there's so many drivers now, and obviously the app companies, they're not going to try to keep the same amount of drivers that are out there now once the minimum wage is instituted. They're not going to just take those losses. They're going to shrink the number of drivers, and so then it just means so many drivers unemployed, really, and we have to have another solution, to get people into other industries. And a lot of these guys, they need help just with basic English skills, frankly, to start off with.
Are you saying retraining for drivers so that there will be fewer people interested in driving for a living?
Yeah. I know I guess it might, the way you're phrasing it there, might sound crazy to the commissioner, but
no, it doesn't actually.
I mean,
3,000 drivers come in every month, and it's a real problem because there's not enough trips to go around. Part of our pay protection rule penalizes the companies that don't keep each and every driver busy. So you bring up a real life problem, is you can't just raise wages unless there's a way to keep the pool smaller. And the other issue that's even further out, but it'll come faster than we know it, is automation. And now drivers don't have a profession at all. So there's a lot of thought that needs to go into where do all these people go to earn a living? And we're a big city, so we should be creative and be looking and identifying those alternatives now. We have Amazon opportunities coming. There's no reason why we can't think about what is the next labor market switch and how are we going to accommodate that. And I'm glad that you raised that point.
As you mentioned, this summer the city implemented a moratorium, at least temporarily, on the number of for-hire vehicles allowed to enter the city or work in the city. There are currently about 100,000 for-hire vehicles in the area, and the moratorium is meant to allow the city, that's a moratorium on new ones, to allow the city a year or so to study traffic and congestion and competition and the impact. So it's been a number of months. Are there any findings yet?
So it's two parallel things. One is we've started the study and we're going through a few different policy options on how we would regulate in a way that helps reduce congestion in Midtown. And the other is, has there been an effect on people's ability to get around with the cap? And our initial look at it is that no, trips continue to rise in the outer boroughs. So even though we're not issuing new licenses, there was enough excess. That means there was enough empty cars already out there that we're still able to provide passengers with service when and where they need it, and in fact that continues to grow.
And so is that a good sign, like the cars are self-distributing to more underserved areas out in the boroughs?
Yes, and it's also a good sign for each and every driver because it means that they have hopefully less empty time and more paying passenger time. And vehicle utilization is important for the city. Empty cars are a problem for the drivers, but they're a problem collectively for us because they make traffic more difficult for all of us to get around in.
And I'm sure you know that in the weeks leading up to that cap, leaders in the African American community, like Reverend Al Sharpton, decried the move, saying that Uber drivers should be allowed to flourish because yellow cab drivers historically discriminate in picking up passengers of color, and the app system doesn't allow that as much. Whether you agree with that characterization or not, on our show during the summer, the mayor said that the TLC would give implicit bias training and create a discrimination task force of some sort to address the issue of yellow cab drivers not picking up black and brown customers. Here he is, 17 seconds on our show.
Making very clear to the drivers that discrimination is unacceptable and that the consequences are severe, including literally being unable to do that work anymore, and to educate the public that they can and should report any discrimination immediately, and it will be followed up on aggressively.
So is this implicit bias training or any other aspect of what the mayor was talking about happening?
Yes, we're creating an Office of Inclusion, which will have a director. It'll have a few different goals. One is to educate, make sure all drivers know what the consequence of discrimination is. And there's a public service video that will include Errol Lewis and drivers and passengers to really get that message out there outside of the cabs. I don't know if anyone's seen our refusal public service messages. Today, they're inside a cab. You don't need it once you're inside. You need it outside so that people who are refused know who to contact to complain. And really driver education about the consequences and really the divisiveness of refusal. We're one city, we're one service, and everybody deserves a ride. And I'd say it's an agree-disagree thing, but it's actually not. It's a fact. This happens every day, and it still happens. And we will work hard to, with the goal of getting this down to zero, but a lot of it revolves around a culture change with drivers to make a shift to realize it's your duty, it's your service, and it makes the city a better place when you transport everybody.
One more question from here inside the Greene Space. Hi.
So this is really a conversation about workers' rights. And we haven't talked at all about unionization. And while you do great advocacy work for the workers in your industry, that's definitely true. But in conversations I've had with Uber drivers, Lyft drivers, many of them recent immigrants, they don't know what unionization is. They don't know what unions are. They don't have the vocabulary to talk about workers' rights. So while what you're doing is great advocacy work, how can we increase the awareness around workers' rights for the people within the industry?
So there are a few groups, the New York Taxi Workers Alliance, and there's a group called the Independent Drivers Guild. Neither of them are unions, but they are organizations that work with drivers, represent drivers, voice their concerns. And I think, there's two steps. One is how much can you accomplish with these sort of quasi-unions, and I think that they're very effective. The New York Taxi Workers Alliance has a national voice and is extremely powerful in getting the needs of their drivers public. But the larger question is, would there ever be a legalized unions among the drivers, and that's probably intertwined with the question of, are they employees or independent contractors? And today they're still independent contractors for the most part, but it certainly is step one to have more organizing within the ranks of the drivers, because it is a powerful advocacy tool that gets listened to.
Well, this is such a part of New York. It's also an industry in crisis, a population in crisis in New York as we close out 2018 and enter 2019. And we want to thank the chair and commissioner of the New York City Taxi and Limousine Commission, Meera Joshi, for coming on and discussing all this with us. We'll keep talking in 2019.
Yes,
thank you so much.
Thank
for
you
coming
so
to
much,
the Greene
and
Space.
thank you for the questions.
And live from the Greene Space, Brian Lehrer on WNYC. Chris Healy will join us on the Greene Space stage and bring his mandolin along right after this.
I'm Jacqueline Sincata, WNYC's program director. Did you know that the largest source of WNYC's funding comes from you? Financial support from listeners ensures that the independent, thoughtful, and reliable reporting you expect continues every time you tune in. Listener support is WNYC's foundation. Please make a charitable contribution during this season of giving. Call 888-376-WNYC or give online at WNYC.org. And thanks.
WNYC is supported by 'Tis Best charity gift cards, which allow gift recipients to choose which charity gets the donation. There are 1.5 million charities to choose from, and 100% of the card value is donated. TISBEST.org. WNYC is a media partner of The Moth, returning to the Great Hall at Cooper Union on December 13th for another night of true stories told live. 5 storytellers will share tales of deep roots and open skies. Details at themoth.org.
Tax relief for the wrongfully convicted that most exonerees don't know about.
I've heard from recipients that it made the difference between paying off debts, getting health care, covering essential matters in their lives. But what this also represents is not leaving these folks behind.
We talked to one man on a mission to help the wrongfully convicted get their due. I'm Tanzina Vega, and that's next time on The Takeaway, weekday afternoons at 3 on 93.9 FM.
Get up to play. Brian Lehrer on WNYC, live from the Greene Space today. And when we're live in the Greene Space, you can watch us do the show as well as listen. We stream live video from here, which you can see at WNYC.org or on the WNYC Facebook page. Now, many of you know Chris Healy as host of the public radio variety show Live from Here, which we air on Saturday nights here on WNYC. Long-term fans will recognize it as the next gen A Prairie Home Companion. Maybe you know his Song of the Week feature, often topical, like the song Waltz for Comey, or the one called St. Michael about Michael Cohen. I think we're going to hear something along those lines shortly. What you may not know is that Chris Healy is a multiple Grammy-winning musician and songwriter, a 2012 MacArthur Fellow, no less. And you know the old line, good enough for folk music? It definitely does not apply, because he is also currently the 2018-2019 Richard and Barbara Debs Composers Chair at Carnegie Hall. Carnegie Hall!
Practice, practice, practice!
He joined his first band, Nickel Creek, when he was less than 10 years old, and he's been collaborating with artists on all sorts of different musical projects since, including Yo-Yo Ma on the award-winning Goat Rodeo Sessions. He's also a member of the progressive bluegrass band, the Punch Brothers. And while Live from Here is stationed for December at the Town Hall here in New York, we are lucky enough to have him drop by the Greene Space to talk to us today, accompanied by his mandolin. So please welcome Chris Healy.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
What is this composer's chair at Carnegie Hall? Is it an actual chair?
I was hoping maybe they would give me one of those, those Ames reclining chairs that are so nice. You could have them in walnut, or maybe you could put a little plaque like "This is my Deb's chair." Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, very mid-century.
No, there's
modern.
no chair. I still have to sit in my little plastic armless chair in the studio. It's disappointing, to say the least.
Very disappointing. I see the residency focuses on this from the Carnegie website, the unique art of a performing composer as well as the evolution of collaborative composition. Do you write music collaboratively?
As much as I can. I mean, I love what happens. I think that's when you're putting yourself in the best spot for the possibility of transcendence. That you're trying to get outside of your own perspective, which I think that's one of art's noblest aims, is to just lift us out of ourselves, to kind of like switch on a new camera in the bio doc that is our life.
So what kinds of concerts does that lead to in the Carnegie Hall residency?
So far, we've done. Let's see. We did a concert of all songs of the week, not all of the songs of the week, but a smattering of them, with a bunch of the people who would kind of help me extract them from my brain.
Those are the topical ones, right?
Yeah, these are a lot of the topical ones. The song that I'll play in just a second was one of those. And then I did a solo thing up there, so kind of veering away from the collaborative thing. Although also I think all collaboration or all composition is collaborative. If you think about the fact that, unless you really just appeared as a musical being and have never heard anything in your life, then you're collaborating with the width and breadth of what came before you.
And since the Michael Cohen sentencing is taking place right now, I think
What's happening?
we won't probably get an update from Richard Hake before the end of the show, but then we'll get one on the 12 o'clock news. But because of the timeliness of that, you're going to perform that song about him, I understand. You want to set up St. Mike?
Yes. So, round about the first wave of all of this, when we were hearing about Cohen's various shenanigans and in the context of our leader's various shenanigans, I was sitting in a coffee shop, as I am wont to do during these weeks when I have to write a song, potentially about what's going on, just reading about everything, and the name Michael gets stuck in my head. I'm going, Michael, Saint Michael. Remember Saint Michael, the Archangel Michael? Archangel, he's a guardian angel.
I'm not up on my archangels.
It's
all
okay.
that much.
It's okay. Those of us who with sordid fundamentalist Christian upbringings, such as myself, may still remember Michael as the Archangel Michael, a guardian angel. You could think of him potentially as a fixer angel. And so that's where the idea for this song came around.
All right. Can't wait to hear it as Chris moves from his chair to stand up at
This is an action interview.
The voice mic and the mandolin mic.
All right. Last night a certain gentleman was up too late, watching certain anchor men and women speculate whether it was if the gentleman would meet his fate or when. He sighed, turned the TV down and undressed for bed, took his hair off its precarious perch upon his head. Then he folded his mighty hands and this is what he said: oh please, Saint Michael, don't you even think of leaving me like a sitting duckish kitten up a cherry tree for Washington to put a hatchet in eventually. I'll be damned if I can tell a lie from the truth anymore. Saint Michael, shut the door on God and everyone. Oh, I don't want to have done the things they say I've done. Be a pile and find a river for the smoking gun. I'll be damned if I can't tell a lie to the powers that are in me. Saint Michael. And then the gentleman yawned and he got underneath the covers and he thought of his treacherous lovers.
lose all his beautiful, treacherous lovers. And when he finally succumbed to his cocktail of Fox and Ambien, he was visited by his champion, and his champion sounded sad, so sad. Don, I've been through it all with you, and I know what you're going through, but I've gotta do right by my wife and my then. The gentleman woke, says, I'll stop you right there. Mike, I know you've got a life, you know that I don't care. I can't believe you'd even think of leaving me, like a sitting duckish kitten up a cherry tree, for Washington to put a hatchet in eventually. I'll be damned if I can tell a lie from the truth anymore. St. Michael shut the door on God and everyone. Oh, I don't want to have done the things they say I've done. Be a pile and find a river for the smoking gun. I'll be damned if you can't tell a lie to the powers that are in me, yet are still allowed to be. Give them something to believe, St. Mike. I know you're there, getting richer by the second just to hear my prayers. Cheese and crackers, Mikey.
Song St. Mike, and we'll continue with Chris. We'll talk more. He'll play again. He's going to do an instrumental on the mandolin. He's such a virtuoso. As we continue with Chris Healy, host of Live from Here in the Greene Space on WNYC. Stay tuned.
And I'm living in a neighborhood that's predominantly Jewish, so if I saw one brown person that looked like me, we came running towards each other like in slow motion, like in an old love story. A black person!
Join us next time for more true stories told live. This week, stories about courage and guts. That's the Moth Radio Hour from PRX.
Tonight at 8 on 93.9 FM, WNYC.
WNYC supporters include Earth Justice, environmental attorneys who sue big polluters and government agencies that foul our air and water and ignore laws that combat climate change. More at earthjustice.org/fight. Earth Justice, because the Earth needs a good lawyer. The John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, helping public radio advance journalistic excellence in the digital age. Knight Foundation believes informed and engaged communities are essential for healthy democracy. More at knightfoundation.org. The Vital Projects Fund and the Museum of Modern Art, where the critically acclaimed retrospective Bruce Nauman Disappearing Acts is on view at both MoMA in Manhattan and MoMA PS1 in Queens. More info and tickets at MoMA.org.
If you believe democracy requires a free press, your station is WNYC, 93.9 FM and AM 820, NPR News and the New York Conversation.
Brian Lehrer on WNYC, live in the Greene Space. You can watch us as well as listen to us when we're live in the Greene Space. The video stream is at WNYC.org or the WNYC Facebook page. So happy to have Chris Healy, host of the public radio program Live from Here, with us in the Greene Space today. He's going to play again in a minute. You won the MacArthur Fellowship, the so-called Genius Grant. in 2012, but I read that it took you a bit longer than it might have for you to learn about your MacArthur grant because you thought it was a robocall?
Yeah, I mean, who answers their phone when they don't recognize the number in this day and age? It's like, a sketchy Chicago number keeps calling over and over again. And I'm like, oh man, someone's definitely trying to either get me to buy something or vote for something, or I don't know. So yeah, I was in the car with my mom, driving from I've been visiting them up in Murray, Kentucky, driving to a show in Nashville, Tennessee, and just didn't answer the thing. And then the guy finally leaves a voicemail, and that was even sketchier. Because he's like, Chris, this is, some the kind of muffly name. Says, I have something that may be of interest to you. And so please call me back. I'm just like, oh, hell no. So eventually, he calls back a couple more times, and I had a manager look up the number, and he was like, "It's from something called the MacArthur Foundation." And I was, yes, exactly. And then,
and it's not something you applied for.
Call back. Yeah.
The grant comes to $500,000, and you could spend that however you wanted. Someone told me.
Yeah, let's hit the bar.
Right. Somebody told me you used it to buy a mandolin, like. All of it or most of it?
As one does. As one does when one is a mandolin player. Yeah, this one, in fact.
You want to describe the instrument?
It's from 1924. It was made in the Gibson factory in Kalamazoo, Michigan, February 18th, 1924, that's the date you want. It's like 61 Bordeaux or something. You know what I'm saying? These things, they sound like chocolate. Oh. Yeah, I love it. So this particular date of that kind of mandolin is very near and dear to my ears.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, weirdly, it does. Yeah.
Well, then, at the risk of being anywhere near it, because I don't want to be the one who breaks it, will you play an instrumental for us?
Absolutely. So, so you mentioned the Goat Rodeo Sessions earlier. This is the first song off of that record. It's called Atta Boy, which is in reference to, in my opinion, the finest cocktail bar in New York City.
I'll ask you. Oh, okay. Now the
Go
mic's
ahead.
back
Yeah,
on.
we're just-
Goat Rodeo. Now that was with Yo-Yo Ma and some other musicians, right? A kind of genre bender.
I suppose so. Yeah, but made kind of under the conviction that genre really is like the cover of the book and not what the books are about.
Healy, everybody. Chris Healy on the mandolin. Wow. What do you like to do more? Play instrumentals like that or play and sing?
Oh, when it's just, I like an exact balance of those things. Like, this is perfect. Sing a funny song, play a rip roaring something or other. That feels nice.
And I saw that when you won the MacArthur Grant, you said you're trying to find a middle ground between visceral and cerebral music. What's visceral? What's cerebral in music?
I mean, I guess I have this yearning personally for music that kind of engages or almost disables, I'd say might be the thing. Like the part of us that is constantly analyzing everything that's in front of us. That's a good thing. That's not it's not a bad thing, but I feel like we rarely transcend ourselves when we're in that space, as opposed to just kind of like turning everything off and letting go. But for me, that doesn't happen unless there's a bunch of food for both of those. For like so something that engages my body and then kind of disables that, and then something that engages my mind and then disables that, so that I end up just sort of floating above the music somewhere.
Yeah, that one was kind of both for me.
Oh,
Do you feel like that?
I would love to feel like that. Yeah, I mean, I'm over there going, okay, now here's the part where I'm trying to like play the bass line and the melody at the same time. And every now and then I get to go like, I like playing the mandolin.
We just have a couple of minutes left. I'm sure people would like to hear how you're navigating finding a new audience with the redesigned show, which of course was Prairie Home Companion when you took it over. I think it's only a year now that it's been called Live from Here. So you're trying to keep the old audience and find a new one in addition?
Yeah, I mean, I would just love for it to be of use. I would love for that 2 hours on Saturday or on Sunday, whenever it is that you listen to it. There's this, I feel like there's an opportunity for us to come together, that's a moment for us to kind of sit around this nationwide campfire or like in our parlor with a round of cocktails or coffees or whatever, and then do what people do when they're in each other's company, which is, we escape from the cares and woes of the week. And if we achieve that escape, then we actually are in a position where we can kind of hold them out at arm's length and examine them and see how they feel and see how our take on those things feels in the company of our fellow human beings. To say nothing of the opportunity for me as just a lover of the herd, HEARD, that there's this spot where I get to share things that I think sound really good or are funny or whatever it is, and for those moments to remind myself and be reminded in the presence of human beings that are making beautiful things, that while we are in myriad ways the worst animals imaginable, that we're also the best. That instinct to make a beautiful thing, and once we make it, that our first move is to share it with someone. That it's not a completed process until we're like, hey, check this out. Or when someone does that to us and we receive this beautiful thing, that the first instinct is to call someone up or text it to them, text them a link or whatever it is, to share that beautiful thing.
I have to jump in because the show is
over.
Chris Healy,
done. Safe.
Live from here at Town Hall all through December. Is that live on Saturday night?
Yes, come out. There are some tickets, but they are rapidly disappearing.
6 p.m. on Saturdays?
Indeed.
At Town Hall of this month. Please thank Chris Healy. And thanks to all of you for coming to the Greene Space and everybody in Radio Land for listening. Brian Lehrer on WNYC.
Support for WNYC comes from